환영합니다.
Welcome to this discussion about Japanese and Korean nationalism with Eric and Dai.
Hey.
I'm going to be moderating in and out of the discussion, but this is between Eric and Dai. I'm just going to let the conversation flow.
To help identify us, I got some gifts for you and I.
Hell yeah.
I got you a Japanese flag,
Yeah.
right? So that can help the audience know who's who. And I got myself a Korean flag. All right. Let's get started. So growing up in America, there was this stereotype of Korean people that they all hate Japanese people. I told my parents about the stereotype, and they were like, good. We want this to be our stereotype. We want to be known as Japanese haters.
Man.
But for my generation and for all the kids in my group, right?
Yeah.
We all saw these people as kind of weird. We're in America, right? We leave our historical differences aside, right? These grievances have nothing to do with us. We're in another country, halfway across the world, right? From Asia, from East Asia. Why are we talking about these things? It's creating unnecessary conflict when we should be working together as Americans.
Yeah. Over here, I haven't met loads and loads of Koreans that I think I would say I had like bouts with or anything like arguments about Korea and Japan. I mean, because of our course, International Relations and War Studies, I have had discussions with Korean people about the way they feel about it and the way their parents feel about it. But I think Eric's right; it does differ, and that it's kind of it would be a weird point of tension to bring up with someone who's living here but has Korean heritage. So I feel like maybe we'd identify more with America or Britain in regards to those wartime issues. I don't think we'd really dwell on those as much as maybe our parents or grandparents would have.
So unity in outsiderness.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just
kind
thought,
of.
yeah.
Well, I mean, it doesn't carry over in things like the food or religion.
Doesn't it?
I grew up with the Japanese religion at home. I grew up Buddhist and stuff. Like,
I have a gift for you, and you as well.
here we go.
About food.
Here's where it gets interesting.
Here's a Japanese product. It's called poke.
Great stuff.
It's very good. It's very nice. It's a delicacy in Japan and in most of Asia. A lot of Asian countries buy it. It's a chocolate covered biscuit, right? You can have some.
Have you ever seen or had one of these now?
I have.
You have? Yeah, they're pretty
Yeah,
good.
trust me.
You want me to open it?
Itadakimasu.
Itadakimasu. There's also a similar product in Korea known as pepero. If you ever try poke and pepero, you'd find that they're basically the same product. They're both chocolate covered biscuit snacks. And there's really no difference between them.
They're the same shape.
Same shape, same taste, same everything, right? And yet, there's still battles between which one's better and which one came first. A lot of the lawsuits between these companies have been about originality, right?
Yeah.
Both countries also have a national holiday on November 11th. 1-1-1-1-1-1, right? November 11th.
Yeah.
And on that day, in Korea, it's called Pepero Day. In Japan, it's called Pokki Niho. Niho? Niho?
No.
Nohi.
Nohi.
Nohi. Pokki Nohi.
Yeah.
Right, Pokki Day. And they both land on the exact same day and the exact same celebrations. They just buy a crap ton of pepper and Pokki. And yet we still fight over these things. You know?
What do you think that says about the two identities?
I think we try to claim so many things over useless things that don't matter. Like pepper and Pokki, realistically, it's just a snack. It's not like it really matters much, right? And yet we still find a need to fight over, which one's better, which one came first. We always fight over these identitarian differences because we're so similar. I think we try to find differences between the both of us.
Doesn't it sort of matter, like, they're different brands, so doesn't the success of a Japanese brand with the same product as like a Korean one, a very similar product, doesn't the success of either brand and maybe its cultural impact in the rest of the world, isn't it sort of a way it's easy to compare the countries that way, like which one does business better, which one makes better food or better snacks or has more impact on the world that way,
So like economic competitions?
Yeah, like maybe it has a political origin.
When we went out to go buy these products, we found a lot of Korean products in the Japanese store, but not so many Japanese products in the Korean store. it was a lot easier to find more flavors of pepperoni than it was to find more flavors of pocky.
How do you feel about some of the more historically controversial points between the two nations to do with the legacy of imperialism and the Second World War? Do you personally feel there's any animosity that you would share between a Japanese person over that, or do you not see it on a personal level?
Well, I was raised with my family telling me about, history and what happened between the two countries. In all of these stories, Japan is always the bad character. And I think that currently, there's a lot of misunderstandings between both countries. Japan wants to admit that they've moved on, but Korea doesn't see it that way. They don't really understand where Japan's coming from. So I think that just raises grievances.
I think Japan, as a country, like economically and politically, globally, has changed its position, like acceptance at least, and its wealth too has changed since its defeat in the Second World War. So I feel like generally there's probably a pride about that progress in Japan. I feel about the work ethic and that they were, in the 90s and 80s, there were all Japanese products everywhere. They were doing really well. So,
right.
Just as a country. So I feel that when Korea asks to take the conversation back to World War II and even older historical grievances, there might be a reluctance for Japan to go back there and to reassociate itself with that past. Yes.
How strong is there an anti-Korean sentiment in Japan? If so, how strong is it?
I think there's a frustration. I don't know if it's anti-Korean, but there's this thing called what's the term? Apology fatigue, which I think is that some people in the Japan, it's got some political weight now. I think that people are tired of apologizing to China and Korea mainly, but of course there are other Asian nations.
Wasn't this the point that Abe made?
Yeah,
using government?
Exactly, and with that followed like increased military spending and sort of legitimacy for all this stuff. He even was trying to change that pacifist constitution. He was trying to alter it. So I think that there is like an unaddressed sort of nationalism in Japan. Maybe not unaddressed, but
consequences of nationalism haven't been dealt with, is what you mean?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I sometimes wonder like whether it's such an available currency politically that it's kind of just everywhere nationalism, but that's kind of a cop out, isn't it? Because I think that the reason for Japanese nationalism specifically is because nationalism tailors itself to like the birth of the nation and sort of the mystical nature of it all. In most stories, there's kind of a mythical thing about it. Any Japanese nationalism is probably going to have to go along sort of similar lines to previous ones. Like no, I don't know that it changes all that much. That they change the story. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, no. In Europe, people have succeeded in creating like a supranational organization based off of like European identity.
Regional identity, right?
Right. Like the idea of Europe. We are all European, right? The identity has been pretty strongly constructed in France, Germany, Italy. These countries have formed that union.
Yes.
Right? Off a common identity.
Yeah.
Right. East Asia, they have so many ties to like bring them together, and yet they still struggle to do so.
I really think despite historical grievances, like they have more interests in common as countries than differences. I really do. Like they're the closest neighbors, even with the sea in the way,
right.
And the trade is all they kind of their closest trading partners. Do you think there's any truth to the claims, I guess, that anti-Japanese sentiment has been utilized by Korean politicians to win votes or to scrape a victory where maybe they amped up, anti-Japanese sentiment, not to delegitimize the anti-Japanese sentiment, but
I'm not sure if it's so much amped up as it is extremely present. I found a poll by the BBC in 2014.
Yeah.
37% of Japan's public sees the Republic of Korea as negative. 79% of Koreans view Japan as negative, right? So there's a huge difference in people who actually care about this rivalry. Right? In Japan, it seems like it's a lot more diminished, whereas in Korea, it seems it's very large and present, right? right now we're currently in a trade war. A lot more Koreans are participating in this movement, right? I looked this up. This market researcher, Embryon, found in December 2020, 71.8% of Koreans were participating in a boycott of all Japanese products.
Yeah.
Right. There's a huge movement called No Japan.
Yeah.
I think it's a cute name, No Japan. But it seems like to me that there's none of the sentiment found in Japan. I think Koreans are a lot more steadfast in their identity as a victim, and thus this makes them feel a lot more proactive and aggressive in their approaches to dealing with Japan.
Which is why I characterize Japanese anti-Korean sentiment as more of a frustration.
Right.
You know, less of a openly anti-Korean,
Like a fight for dignity and national pride.
Because I think where's the legitimacy for being tired of apologizing if you're anti-Korean? Because it means that you're just siding with the old guard.
Yeah. The president of Korea, during this trade war, he said that we will never again lose to Japan. Right. So I think for Korea it's a lot of pride. You know, they want to show that we can't be a dog to this country anymore, or we can't be viewed as a lesser partner. Right. I think that identity is very strong with the Koreans, a bit more so than the Japanese. There's a lot of similarities, but there's also a lot of common threats to both Korea and Japan, right? One of these threats being the DPRK. So North Korea, I think that North Korea stands as a very significant threat to both South Korea and Japan, but for different reasons. Same but different. So for both Japan and Korea, it's about fighting communism, right? And stopping the spread of this evil ideology.
It was, but that's kind of a leftover, isn't it?
Well, it still is today, wouldn't it?
I think that's like that's the interesting overlap in Japanese Korean identity is the US connection that they both have. They both kind of were and are quite reliant on the US for they have been for money and they are for military.
They're both dependent
defense,
on they're both dependent on the United States. Yeah?
So, yes, that's a mutual interest that they both. That's a shared interest that they both have. That's a connecting thing.
I think one big difference would be for Japan. The existence of the DPRK is a lot bigger threat than the existence of South Korea, because Japan is a so-called puppet of the Americans, but it's also the historical enemy, right? So they would go, if they do unify under the North, the first target after America would be Japan.
Perhaps Japan first, just because they're America's closest base after South Korea.
That doesn't really stand true for Korea, and I think that identity is resonant amongst both Koreans. That Japan is the original enemy, and that they should be the ones who should be feared. Ty,
yes.
What does this flag mean to you?
Oh God, it's striking. Maybe you could say it was more striking than this one, but I mean,
what do you think that flag currently means in Japan?
Nationalist.
Negative or positive, do you think, to the public?
I think obviously the nationalist portions of Japan might be secretly quite proud of that one.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, I think people think it's quite a dangerous one. Although I do think that the Japanese Navy just flies that flag sometimes. You know about the Dakdo Islands? That's the Korean name for them.
Tokdo.
Tokdo.
Yeah.
My apologies.
It's fine.
I think that was it Japanese or Korean national? Whenever Japanese, it's not Korean, but they're contested by China. But the Senkaku Islands, do you know about that? They're in the East China Sea. Japanese nationalists, when they landed on the islands to claim a lighthouse, used this flag when they landed on the island.
They?
Yeah,
did they?
This one, not this one, because I think this has nationalist connotations. I mean, it's a callback, isn't it?
Imperialism, right?
Yeah, to strength in their eyes, but
interesting.
I think it's I wouldn't fly it.
In a Korean perspective, the Japanese government is still the same government. It can trace its lineage to the World War II government.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's true.
Its leadership wasn't changed. Its emperor was allowed to stay in power.
Yes.
Right? It's the same government. And I think that a lot of Koreans, both North and South, fear that this government could resurge in bouts of violence. Right? But I think from the Japanese perspective, the idea is ridiculous. Look how far Japan's come, right? Look at how pacifist it is, how much of an American ally it is, and yet you're saying that we will declare war on a sovereign country. That's a ridiculous claim to make. I find that these countries are very tied to their history, and that the identity and the legacy carries on to this day, and you just can't shake that off, because your history is part of your identity, right? What you grew up as, what you went through, that is constitutive of your identity.
But don't you think we pay attention to some history and not others when we talk about identity?
Regardless of which part of your history you shine light on, that is your identity, right? What
you think so?
All of your history makes up your identity, and you can choose to select a certain period to focus on, but that can't dismiss the rest of the history that made you, right? As an individual or as a country, everything that you went through builds up your character, right?
But I'm, as I said, my family isn't from one country. So what do I do?
I'm not saying you
histories of mine.
I'm saying you as a person, but like in general, right?
In general,
history creates identity, and you can use any bit of that history to highlight a certain part of your identity. With a Japanese perspective, the imperial legacy is part of its identity, and the Koreans use that aspect of its history instead of, let's say, I don't know, the Meiji Restoration period, and they use that imperialist period to highlight that aspect of its identity, because the identity still is present, right? You said that they planted the flag on the Senkaku Islands, right? So it does come out. It does come up. It is part of its identity, right?
An identity, but it's
An
not.
identity.
What is the identity?
It's not the whole picture. It's not a whole picture, but it's a part of it. With Korea, the identity it's so split. It's kind of hard to say, but both halves are very anti-Japanese. The North being more militant, and the South being a bit more diplomatic in a sense. Right. I have another gift for you. I bought some Yakult. This is a Asian delicacy, right? I think they sell all across the world, honestly.
It's a health product.
It's a health product, right? It's like a yogurt thing. It's very nice.
Speak to your gut, right?
Speak to your gut, yeah. I don't know if you have had it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Big in the UK.
What do you think?
I love it.
I think this is a very good symbol of unity that we as Asian people can build some.
Thank you. Why is it a symbol of unity?
Because all of our identities and nations can relate to this. I don't know how it is in Japan, but in Korea.
My grandma loves these, bro.
She loves them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. So does my family. My family loves these. In Korea, there's a job. It's for ladies, and it's called the Yakult Ajuma, the Yakult lady. She strolls around your city with a basket full of Yakult, and she just gives it out.
For free?
Yeah. Every now and then. I don't know if they have anything like that in Japan.
I've never seen that. I've never seen that. We have people who deliver something called natto. Do you know natto?
I know natto.
Yeah?
I know natto.
We have that. But yeah. Natto.
Well, hey, every Asian person enjoys this. I think that we can connect over these similarities.
And Noah too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, worldwide.
It's a worldwide phenomenon, yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's not good.
You should call it.
You want some soft drink?
Yo, yeah.
What are those ones?
So this is Milk Kiss.
It's like actually got milk in it.
No.
No, but it's like a milk type thing.
No.
It's a carbonated soft drink. This is Kalpis.
Cat piss.
What do you think is cow piss?
Yeah.
First time round.
I think it's cool how Japan and Korea produces similar products.
Yeah.
Very similar, right? And we can enjoy these. And yet we still find somehow a way to fight over.
Maybe if you're just used to seeing, like, every time you look at it, Milkis. You see this, it's like, what is this off-brand Milkis?
Oh yeah. I grew up in Calpis, so like I always.
Grew up in Calpis?
Yeah. I love Calpis.
Right to the beginning.
Oh yeah.
Well, is that it then?
Yeah.
Just
I mean, unless you guys got anything else.
Arigatou gozaimasu.
감사합니다.
Yeah. Thank you for coming. Thank you for watching.
Yeah, thanks for watching and listening.
I hope you learned some stuff about the Korean and Japanese identities and what it means to us as immigrants or children of immigrants and for broader geopolitical scenarios. Thank you.
Thank you very much.